I call the honourable member for Oxley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. In rising here in the main committee today to speak to this amendment, I must firstly make it clear that I am in agreement with what is proposed. I don't think I would be wrong in saying that nearly every member in this place will confirm that the highest number of complaints they and their officers receive relate to the child support scheme and its myriad of shortcomings. The Howard government came to power with part of its platform being a return to family values. It is in the areas of social engineering that Labor tried to force onto this country, and especially in the areas of family law, that this government, if it is worth its salt, can begin to clean up the mess that the previous government left behind. One of the most direct examples of the ravages that are being forced on ordinary Australians is the operation of the child support scheme. It is bureaucracy gone mad. They say that from little acorns, great oaks grow. And if this government will bother to listen to what is coming from those of us on the backbenches instead of continuing down its born-to-rule elitist path, this amendment could be the acorn that will bring equity and fairness to a lot of parents who have had the misfortune to have their marriages break up. The amendment before you, Mr Deputy Speaker, is merely an attempt at a tweaking of the edges of the monster that is the child support scheme. But it is a start, and it puts to rights a couple of areas of poor legislation and practice that will make an unworkable and unwieldy act a little more rational. I support the proposed changes that this amendment brings, but we need to look much deeper into this unjust act and tweak like we have never tweaked before if we are to obtain justice for all. As we all know in this place, a government backbench committee has been taking a hard and serious look at the CSS and its lackey, the CSA. Assisting some of the members of this committee is a very professional organisation, members of which have a vital first-hand interest in the outcomes of this committee's recommendations. I talk, of course, of the Lone Fathers Association of Australia, which has had the opportunity to study the recommendations that the Backbench Committee is taking to Cabinet. I believe it is appropriate that some of the association's comments be read into the public record. In essence, the Lone Fathers Association is in favour of the committee's recommendations, saying that, if adopted by the government, they represent a very substantial improvement on the present child support arrangements. But the association has concerns about what it sees as an apparent lack of realisation by the committee that it is the excessively high formula percentages which are the fundamental cause of most of the problems under the present scheme. It is by reducing the percentages to a reasonable level which offers the basic solution to these problems. The association claims that many of the suggestions being made by the committee would simply be unnecessary if the percentages were changed. Although the concept of changing the basis of the current calculation for support payments from gross income to net income seems on the surface to have merit, this by itself will not solve the problems faced by many non-custodial parents. The association claims that it will also be necessary to change the structure and level of the percentages based on a proper judgment about the payments which would be fair at each level of disposable income. In its study into the recommendations, from which I quote, the association says that changing to a calculation based on net income will tend to be an improvement because it will, other things being equal, result in much better equity between different levels of income where a flat percentage rate applies. However, a single flat percentage rate even on an after-tax basis, is far from being the best and fairest arrangement. For a fairer and better arrangement, several different percentages will be needed, applying to different income ranges. This is referring to the sliding scale concept referred to by the committee. Before I go further into the response from the Lone Fathers Association, I think that it must be made clear that most non-custodial parents are concerned for their children's futures and are willing to financially contribute to those futures. What has to be taken out of the child support scheme is the unfairness that applies in so many cases when its replacement by a system that is based not on the remnants of a rampant feminism of the past couple of decades, but on a just and equitable situation for both parents. The current system, in fact, often works to the detriment of the custodial parent. It is so draconian that in many cases the non-custodial parent is forced to opt for the dole rather than try to live on the pittance that is left after the CSA is finished with them. This self-defeating in that it goes dead against the original intent of this legislation to remove the financial load of child support from the taxpayers' shoulders onto the parents, and it is artificially increasing our unemployment payments to those parents who take the dole option, not to mention the loss to national productivity of these otherwise eminently employable people. In another area, the current scheme totally removes incentive for non-custodial parents to earn overtime or other penalty payments, in that these are all taken into account when calculating the percentage of payment. Non-custodial parents who remarry often find it absolutely necessary to earn money from a second job or overtime in this main job simply to support the second family. But the disincentives of the scheme see the CSA and the custodial parent grabbing an excessive share of this extra money. But again, the Lone Fathers Association has picked up problems with excluding second incomes and overtime from the CSS percentages, and that it discriminates against different employment structures and increases, not decreases, the bureaucratic nightmare that is the child support scheme. According to the association, the correct solution to the problem is to alter the structure of formula percentages to allow for the fact that income tax rates are progressive with income. This means setting child support percentages at a flat rate or declining rate on an after-tax income. As to the recommendation of the introduction of a sliding scale of child support according to a child's age, the Lone Fathers agree that, while fine-tuning of the system is perhaps desirable in principle, it could tend to distract attention from the more important issues, the need for a reduction in the overall formula percentages. The association quite wisely points out that such an amendment to the scheme would add significantly to the cost of administration of the Child Support Agency, and this at a time when the CSA is already facing serious difficulties with proposed cutbacks in staff numbers. This will mean more trouble for the government, not less. Access for non-custodial parents is also an issue that the committee has looked at, with a recommendation that the paying parent be reimbursed through child support payments for those periods when he or she have access to the child. In other words, the suspension of child support payments when children are on access visits with their non-custodial parent. The association agrees that this is a good idea, a proposal that might remove the attraction for some custodial parents in removing themselves and the children to a great distance from the non-custodial parent just in order to make access difficult. Not only that, but it is pure logic that when the custodial parent is not financially supporting the children during access times, it does not make sense that the non-custodial parent should continue to pay support payments as well as being responsible for the day-to-day support of the children while they are in his or her control. In addressing the committee's recommendations that a cap be placed on child support to genuinely reflect the actual cost of maintaining a child, and that more consideration be given for second families to ensure across-the-board equity for the children of both marriages. The Lone Fathers Association is very scathing at the formula upon which current percentages are based. They describe the academic research done by Espenshade in the United States and Lee in Australia as arbitrary, subjective, unrealistic, and seriously misleading assumptions. As far as assessing the cost of raising children are concerned, the results of those studies are essentially nonsense. They go on to say, fundamentally, what is needed is not a formula based on the type of nonsense data produced by Espenshade and Lee, but a more common sense and realistic appreciation of the actual circumstances of separated families, and in particular, the incentives to earn income. In that formula, amounts of child support payable could essentially be limited to a reasonable amount by the setting of appropriate formula percentages. Insofar as the equity of second families and the children of those second families, it is vital that any formula used to calculate child support ensures equity for all. Children of subsequent marriages are as equally entitled to a fair share of the non-custodial parent's income as are the children of the original marriage. On this matter, the Lone Fathers say, to implement the Espenshade-Lee approach consistently, it would be necessary to grant all children, whether from first or subsequent families, an approximately equal share of the non-custodial parent's income, along similar lines to the proposal made by Justice Kay and reported in the 1991 report of the Child Support Evaluation Advisory Committee. Fundamentally, what is needed is not a formula based on the type of nonsense data produced by Espenshade and Lee, but a common sense and realistic appreciation of the actual circumstances of separated families, and in particular, the incentives to earn income. In that formula, there would be much more attention paid to proper equity between the children and the first and subsequent marriages. In closing, Mr Deputy Speaker, what we have inherited here with the child support scheme and the child support agency is, according to the body that arguably has more working knowledge of the scheme and a vital self-interest in it, the worst kind of a camel, which we all know is a horse designed by a committee. The tweaking at the edges that this amendment offers can, if this government has the guts and the gumption to take it head on, eventually bring proper and true social justice to a significant number of real Australians out there who are suffering unnecessarily. I commend the amendment, but on behalf of a lot of fathers and mothers in my electorate, make a plea to the government to undertake, as a matter of the highest priority, a full and exhaustive review of this quagmire of an act. Thank you.